Delays are nodes that I probably won't talk much about, but I still want to cover them. If you go to any blueprint and type delay, there's going to be 3 notable delays that we're going to talk about. And you probably, even if you're a beginner, you probably used at some point a delay. This is the most basic version of it. And this basically means that when an event triggers this delay, after some time, something will happen. And this is going to happen in any case. You cannot stop it. It's just going to happen after a second. So it's good for some cinematics, maybe some animation, something that kind of just is going to happen, something that needs to happen. But if there is any variation or anything that you have to kind of check for, this might not be the best solution because you cannot kind of stop it as it starts going. So if I put print in here, this is the most simplest version. You can see it just says hello, pretty easy. Keep in mind delays, you cannot put them in functions because functions can't receive any latent actions. So whatever happens over time, you cannot use them. So if you ever want to kind of encapsulate some piece of code, you're going to have to use macros if you're using delays. So that's just a thing to keep in mind. Also, if you put a delay to just 0, that basically means it's going to just do after 1 tick. It's going to trigger whatever it's going after. Another one is conveniently delay until next tick, which is kind of the same as a delay 0, but it's kind of more convenient where it says you right away, we're just going to do something after 1 tick. And this I think is mostly useful for things like when you need to just wait a little bit for something to happen. So sometimes some event begin plays happen before or after some other event begin play. And then what can happen sometimes is, let's say, you have your animation blueprint and it needs to get a reference to the character, but the reference is still not set in some blueprint. So you have to wait maybe just 1 tick to get that reference. So sometimes putting a little delay can give you enough time for everything to initialize in the game for you to get some references, because you don't want to get errors or invalid references, stuff like that. So that's usually when you would use delay until next tick, where you just need to wait a little bit for something. Especially if you have a specific design pattern that you kind of create where things are not coupled together too much, so there is not clear execution of events. Putting next tick can give you enough breathing room to kind of have things not be in the perfect order, but still reliably get references or get executed when they need to get executed. And let's go to the last one, which is retrigger of delay. And this basically means that if I call this delay, and I call this event again before the delay is finished, the delay is going to be reset. If I have something like this, this is my delay length. If I start the delay, and let's say at this point I call this delay again, it's going to go start from the beginning and then continue going. It is useful, but it's kind of maybe hard to see the use sometimes. But how I usually use it is when I have something that I want to happen, but if this event is triggered again, I don't want the whatever is after the delay to happen at random point. I want the things to kind of reset and go from the beginning again. So this might be like, let's say you have an enemy that when the enemy gets shot, or when the player shoots the enemy, you want the enemy for, let's say, 3 seconds to try to search for a player, and if the player is far away, he's going to try to kind of find him, and after 3 seconds he wants to go into the idle or patrolling mode or whatever. And let's say this is the 3 seconds. And let's say the player shoots the enemy is searching for the player, and at this point the player shoots the enemy again. If you use the normal delay, what's going to happen is this is still going to go and trigger after, let's say it's like 0.8 seconds left. So how it's going to look in the game, it's going to be the player shoots the enemy starts searching for the player shoots the enemy again, and after half a second the enemy starts going away. And it's going to be really weird and confusing, like why the enemy just stopped searching for me. While with the retrigger of delay, what's going to happen is the player is going to shoot the enemy, and then the enemy is going to reset again 3 seconds, maybe player shoots again, the reset, and then from the player's perspective, how this is going to look is for the 9 seconds the enemy was searching for the player, as long as the player was shooting him. And every time the player shot and retriggered this event, the enemy started searching for additional 3 seconds, or it got extended by 3 extra seconds or something like that. So that's kind of a good way to think about it, where whatever happens after this retrigger delay, if you want this to happen if this is retriggered before the delay is finished. And sometimes even for like UI stuff, so maybe the player opens up the UI and something should flash in the UI after, I don't know, 2 seconds. if the player closes and opens the UI again, or maybe hides the UI or something, do you want instantly this thing to flush because he opened it up at 1.8 seconds and then after 0.2 seconds this thing flushed, or do you want that effect to always reset and be after 2 seconds that the player opens something, so let's say. So yeah, this node can kind of be confusing sometimes when it's the best way to use it, but it's just good to be aware of it, because when you get into the situation where this is needed, you're gonna know instantly, okay, yeah, this is the node that you want, that you basically want. But if you don't know about this node, you're just gonna get confused and think about how you can solve that issue that you have. Yeah, so these 3 nodes, pretty useful. Keep in mind you cannot use them in functions, so if they ever give you error, that's because you cannot have any latent actions delays in functions, only macros and blueprint graphs.